This is the Take Your Turn 2022 tournament hosted by Groove of War. Groove of War hosts Wargroove commentary and analysis. Obviously, a link to their channel in the description. Take Your Turn is composed of 3 events: Wargroove, Chess, and Go. And on this channel, we're looking primarily at Go. Man, I've said that many times now that we're getting into the end of round 3. My name is Arn Foster. This commentary is aimed at newer players, players in double-digit Q ranks. If you spot any mistakes, things that we miss you think that are important to mention, definitely let us know in the comments. Commentating with me today is Just Your Eventual Ruler. Hey, Ruler.
Hi. This is a game that was played in the tournament.
It was a Go game played in the Go portion of the Take Your Turn tournament, and a game that you played.
I feel like some people would say this isn't Go. It's that kind of game.
I think we'll get right into it because I think it's definitely worth talking about. Go game or not, I think there's a
Okay,
lot to
wait.
unpack.
I think there's one person playing Go and the other person not realizing that they're playing Go. That's
And
a
that's
bit mean.
I think
But
that it's a really good. Well, we'll see. I think there's a really good example between two different perspectives and a really cool look at it, the way in which that plays out. That I hope will be enlightening.
yeah.
But to be more specific, we are talking about round 3, game 2 between Spotyus playing black and Ruler, who we have with us today, playing white.
Yeah. I'm gonna treat this game like a Jubongo because I think that's basically how I played it.
Yeah, that's fair. So when we look at this, we have Spotyus now playing black and starting with starting in the center. If we go a couple moves, it I think as really you're alluding to, it has a very unusual start.
Yeah, we're just gonna skip the fact that I passed.
I I was gonna skip the fact that you passed. Would you like to
I think
talk
that's
about
fair.
passing? but
Um, so what I was going to do was pass and then play, like, if they played normal, I was gonna pass another time, but they didn't play normal. They played Tengen. So if you get 2 moves as Tengen, it's really hard to be annoying to it because you can actually, like, you don't actually need to play the corner immediately if you have like 2 sides and Tengen because you basically got a huge quadrant. But if
right.
you play normal, it's much easier to do shenanigans on the side of the board.
And so then
um,
so you ended up going for the 3-3 point after on your second move. Played
um,
um, pretty close to the
People
corner
think
there.
this is ironically a move that allows you to be aggressive because it's safe in the corner. It allows you to just go crazy elsewhere because this is guaranteed life, even if black gets 2 moves here. Um, so because of that, I could just go crazy after I get another corner or two. I mean,
From
that's the main reason. Yeah.
and so we have Spadius very quickly. I think uh, adopting this center base play. Clearly, Tengen to start with, then the start point to the right, and then following up with P5 here. If we can just
I
jump
don't
ahead.
know.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if that's the move. Generally, if you see a 3-3 point, it's best to shoulder hit it immediately, even if it means it costs you getting an extra corner because you'll get a good result out of the interaction in general. Um, so because of that, I think there's probably a few other moves like you could lightly approach it after taking a corner, but like most people would advise you just approach it immediately because if they just ignore it, you can get massive influence very quickly, and it becomes very hard for white to do anything except invade.
So then, do you feel like that with P5, Spadius is being a little bit too cautious and deferential and kind of giving up? Like you are like you saying, you are playing close to the corner so that you can then be aggressive, and rather than shoulder hit, you've got Spadius back here, kind of ceding a good deal of space to you.
Yeah, it feels very slack because you have the option to just do knights, like a large knight's move away, or a 2-space if you really want to be conservative with it. It's, in my opinion, just too strong for whites. It's like you're giving white more space because you didn't play close enough, even though you're actually going to win a fight if it happens behind you because you have the extra 10 getting it inside stone.
Right.
So because of that, it makes more sense to be severe here, just because you'll get more points out of it. But they came here with a special strategy.
They did. They did. So you go ahead, you play the large knights move, and then they play O6. Before we comment on O6, let's see the way in which the next couple moves develop, because it's sort of, I think we can then sort of talk
Yeah,
about more generally.
I don't think the first few moves really matter that much as the general strategy that's going on.
So by the time we get to move 20, we have, I think, the foundation for the way the rest of this game plays out. And I would like to get your thoughts on what Spotyus was attempting to do, and the reasoning you see behind it, because it looks like that it's an unusual strategy, to say the least.
Well, what Spotyus was thinking, we talked about it after the game. They thought they were going to build just super big, but they played the center first. And a common theme in games that are played in the center is that you end up just not having points at all. And the issue is because you're building 4 sides, and your opponent really only has to build 2 or 3 sides at a time.
Right.
If that.
If that.
Sometimes they only have to build 1 side. In fact, I could probably build 2 sides and then just reduce.
Right.
Like, that's probably the best way to go about it.
I think another thing that we maybe haven't mentioned as much in the past when we've come up with these scenarios, but I think I realized is good to mention, in addition to sort of having to build up less sides. For example, if something should happen, if, let's say, Spotyus gets aggressive and is successful in invading in the bottom right here and compromising that your influence and being able to undermine that developing structure, the bottom right may be in trouble, but that doesn't affect the rest of the board. One of the big things about this center-based strategy like this is that not only can you be reduced on 4 sides and you need to build up simultaneously in 4 different directions, any infringement, because it's all connected, a sufficient infringement on one part of your structure jeopardizes the entire thing, which means you've got to be looking at, which means that threats can spiral out of control in a way that they can be contained. It's much easier often to contain in the way that the ruler you were playing, because it doesn't affect everything. It's not all tied together in the same way.
It's more so that you can just allow stuff to be to be uncontained sometimes. That's the real power. Like, for example, if Black really just wanted to keep going left on the top, I would just build the corner, and they might get some points on the side or just reduce a bunch, but did it really accomplish that much for them? They still have the issue of their stick not even being guaranteed alive, or at least alive efficiently. You build a bunch of diagonals, you're not really saying that I'm trying to build eyes, you're saying I want to build good shape eventually.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's really interesting to me about this is we typically think of the center as is often a very fast, big play, which is why I think it's so interesting to look at the difference between the 2 setups 23 moves into the game, where you've taken literally, or you've set up influence literally everywhere but the center, and yet that is the bigger play. Like, if you look here, if we were to do just real quick calculations, so you've got you've got 19 on a column, so you've got 19 by 3 and another 19 by 3, so like 57, 114.
So yeah, it's
The
19. I would say just because I have enough influence a little bit outside of my corner on the bottom, it's probably assuming I don't get invaded at least. It's probably around 19 times 3 times 3 plus an extra box, right? Uh, that's one. How long is that? One,
here,
two. It's real. I can't count.
yeah.
Three.
So
That's a six. It's a six box. So it's a six by. Undetermined how long it's actually going to be, but
yeah, and I guess I was thinking you're absolutely right. I was thinking if we're just looking at this, so if you were to draw just for like comparison's sake, because we tend to think of, or I think there is a feeling that we've looked at a couple times that without close reading you can it's not uncommon to intrinsically feel like the center must be the bigger play. When you start to actually add up the points, even roughly here on the side, even though you didn't take anything on the center, you've just taken the scraps on the side, the amount of points that you've garnered here, or not you have garnered, but that you're looking to garner, where your influence is strongest, is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 190 points. Whereas if you then go look at the center, the idea of the center, not the actual board, not the actual configuration here, because you would have to take out the points for that go in the center. It's an 11 by
yeah,
11 space. That's it. That would be at max 121. So from this position, taking a step back, even from this position, and the idea of playing big, although you played the corners and played the sides, you have like a more than a 70-point advantage. I think we talked about earlier, probably like close to a 100-point advantage at the moment. And I think one of the big things for me is that, or to highlight, is that it was still 23 moves, right? It was still each player playing once. And a large part of it feels like, is the way in which you guys utilize your space. So Spotyus concentrated everything in the center here, and everything is it's all very close together. Whereas your influence, I mean, you played much wider, which obviously means there's vulnerabilities, right? But again, because you're playing against the sides, it's a lot easier to defend and to turn that into territory. And the ways in
yeah,
which, the fact that you're playing, it's interesting to me the way in which, comparatively you played looser in a way, whereas, your stones, in the sense that your stones are more spread out, but you are in a much stronger position than the player who was looking to play big, who was thinking that I want to play this large macro style, I want to play this large framework style. I think the big thing is like, what is it? Maybe better to say, would you, or ask, could you tell us a little bit about how you approach framework, because you've got the larger framework, and instead Spotyus is in the center but doesn't have any real structure to work off of.
it's for the most part about the correct direction of play and really just um you know uh, like being efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you build big, you have to be for the most part faster than your opponent, and if you let your opponents play spots that you want to, that's effectively a pretty major reduction on your part. Um, so because of that, you have to know what you can sacrifice, why you can sacrifice, and how much you can sacrifice. Um, and at least coming back to the game,
Yeah.
I there's just not enough points by the time Spotyus plays a big diagonal. It's just I like they played. Let's just say they played one, two, three, four, five. 5 or 6 of the stones like that, I'd still be winning by roughly as much, just because I'd be able to get all the star points,
Right.
or all the remaining star points, right? And then even if they try to start jumping around, I can solidify because there's enough space between the center and the sides to where I can predict where they're going to go and start protecting. It's like the chasing the angel problem, where eventually the angel will always be able to capture the devil as long as there's enough space. Um,
No, I think
that's
that's
kind of how Go works.
right.
Space is very strong in this game. That's I actually used to. So when I first started, I really enjoyed playing the elephant jump, and then the computer would absolutely destroy me because it was always a defect, and I didn't know how to respond. The trick is to respond with moves with space. Um, a two space jump with one of the from one of the stones generally does the trick. Um, and I now use it. It's actually useful. I think I used it in a game against Zeronix to trap some stones.
No, yeah, I think you did. Yeah, and I think that's also really, if I can segue out of that, I think that's a good example too of like, of sort of the larger, maybe another larger point to be made here, which is that it's not that large frameworks or Moyo based play can't work. You've demonstrated that you can have successful games with it, but there is a finesse to it. I think another thing, if I can demonstrate real briefly, is just so if we, yeah, I think it was right here. The other thing for me is just the efficiency you mentioned multiple times. You know, shape. If we were, there were 8 moves that they made along the center line here. If we just make 8 other moves, one, I'm trying to remember roughly where they were. 2, where you were. Let's say 3, 4, 5. You know, if we like, if we were to look here, if we're still looking at the center, if we've covered much more ground, and we have much more we can work with than the situation in which in which all of the stones are through are just in this line across the center, this diagonal line across the center. So I think that is, when you're talking about spacing, and the way in which you use space in this game, I think it's a really good juxtaposition of when you use spacing well, it sets you up to be able to have a world's easier mid game, and allows you to be able to build off of a much easier foundation. Whereas right now, from this point on, Spotyus really has to. Spotyus is in a really difficult position because there isn't there is a giant line to work from, but there isn't. They're gonna have to be really aggressive to try and get any points in addition to trying to find reductions. Before we continue on and sort of look at how this plays out, did you have anything else you wanted to mention about the way the game opened?
Not particularly, but there is an addendum. Actually, I'm wrong about the Angel and Devil game. Not only do I have the positions reversed, but I also there's a pretty interesting strategy for the Angel to win. So the Angel's the one that runs, but the Angel can always win. The Angel the Devil problem is a classic math problem. It's an interesting one. I would go suggest looking it up.
The other nice thing is, because of the way you set up your spacing initially, when Spotyus then tries to make those reductions happen, when Spotyus looks to be aggressive, it's much easier now for you to not only lock those things down, prevent that aggression or stop that aggression, and while simultaneously shoring up your own influence and starting to turn it into something closer to territory. So we can see, like, that the way in which you're able to utilize that 2-space jump to immediately negate Spotyus trying to push in. And then obviously the other big thing that I think you mentioned towards the beginning as well is that you're in a position here to do reductions, and those reductions are devastating. Was there a reason? Maybe you could talk a little bit about why you decided to go ahead and try and be aggressive now, as opposed to perhaps trying to push in here or shore up the top right, or do a little bit more to shore
Um,
up the bottom left.
I already have points, right? Or not guaranteed points, but pretty well. I do have guaranteed points on the top
Mm-hmm.
and probably on the left as well, at least somewhere on the left. So it's a good idea to strike the inefficient shape right now, since just them getting an extra move here is pretty crucial on either side. And this is a side that's easier for them to develop and easier for me to disrupt. Um, I could disrupt it with a farther move on the bottom side,
Mm-hmm.
like bottom left, but it's farther away from my stones, and because of that, it's really hard for me to make sure that everything there is protected because there's still invasion points. Three major ones, I would say: the 3/3 invasion, and then the defects in between the star points. Um, I think there's another. I learned about another defect that's really hard for me to deal with in this position. I think it's like two spaces higher from that. Um,
From the
so from the defects, um, it's something weird like that where it's just like really hard to deal with that kind of stone, kind of like there.
hmm,
They don't have the timing. Because I think in theory you'll be able to get out.
uh,
Something like that. I'd have to go relearn it, but
sure,
it's useful knowledge for me to know because I
right,
play star points a lot.
right.
Um, anyways, yeah, it's easier to reduce from this side, and they already have points on the bottom right, so not really. I don't really care if we like definitely like if they extend from here. Okay, oh well, I don't get points there, but I can be very annoying in reducing since the diagonals are kind of a weak shape when you start approaching them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mostly because if they don't respond, they like have to respond, otherwise they lose their stick. Um, Diagonals are good for shapes, but not good for points, and this is kind of why what I'm about to do here. I think.
Right.
Um,
So you go ahead, and this I think is sort of indicative of um, the what we see earlier in the play, in Spotyus' opening, where there's clearly a mindset and a methodology at work here, but I think that it ends up being unfortunately a little hampered by a slowness, so that we have the slowness of having going stone by stone across the center. We see the desire to kind of shore this space up and try to be able to combat your K13 stone, but it does feel like it's sort of that H14 is a little slow.
it's trying to approach. It's like I think it's trying to make sure that the connection is stable because I think you can thread the cut now. But actually, I can't. I don't think so, at least. There's too much Aji if I go for the cut. But the bad part about this is that it gives me a bunch of peeps, and that's just annoying because you have to choose whether you want me to cut you off or um, whether you want to like allow it. You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
the classic B2 bomber peeps, and then this is just big. This is
Yeah.
big and also stunts their development because this is the easier side for them to develop now.
I
Um,
I really like this Q13 play, because I wanted to mention that I think the other thing about the H14 is is the intent makes sense, but I think it also feels like it doesn't put enough pressure back on you, that you don't need to respond to it. You haven't been stymied or stifled in any way, and you've been able to get the free poke, and you're just gonna then you can head off and continue to build at a faster pace, and it's exactly what you do with your Q13, while simultaneously putting extra pressure. That, I mean, you're also putting pressure, starting to put pressure on that Q10 stone, and kind of threatening the right side of that structure. and I think it's interesting to see sort of the juxtaposition there. And again, I think this is another, again, that instance of you want to shore up that Q10. You want to, or that seems what Spotyus wants to do, wants to prevent any sort of, or decrease some of the vulnerabilities here. But I think, if you were looking at this and you felt like you needed to respond in some way to the Q13, would you be looking at P9, or would there be some other moves in the area that you think?
I think an armpit hit would probably be Sente, or just annoying to deal with. Like, it's probably one of the bigger moves you can do in that spot.
An armpit hit.
It's like a shoulder hit. It's like a Knight's move shoulder hit. It's
To
the
the right or
same
to the?
thing.
Would you go to the
I don't
right?
think it really matters. I'm pretty sure it's to the right specifically, but we'll call them both armpit hits because there's two arms,
I guess that's fair. In this case, would you be looking more, if you were, when you're comparing them, would you be looking more at B to try
This
to
one's hard. This personally, I wouldn't get myself in this situation. It's really hard to really justify. B is more thematic with what you're trying to do. That's the move I would suggest playing. If you're like trying to play this style. However, the issue is I've already invaded this area, so you're not really going to get a bunch of points. A is going to yield way more points, and I pretty much have to respond to that. If you want me to, like, if I want to keep those side points, which I don't have to, I can just calmly invade slightly further with the large Knight's move.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So those are, I think, in both instances, one of the other things that you've mentioned a bunch too is that compare either A or B, so P12 or R12. If we compare that to what happened in P9, P9 is purely defensive, which obviously there are times in which moves like that are necessary. But one of the benefits of comparatively between with a P12 or an R12 is that you are still trying to enhance, reinforce the structure you're trying to build here, but also you are putting pressure back on your opponent. Ideally, you can get Sente, you can get initiative, because your opponent will have to respond, which enables you to then immediately decide where the flow of play goes next, as opposed to being the one having to constantly answer. So, and we've talked about a lot of these concepts before, but I think it's nice to see some of the alternatives that you would be looking at if you were in this position.
I think very specifically, I would just play on the bigger side at this point, which is the bottom left. Yeah, it's just prudent to get as many points as you can, and the issue is either way that you play. If you play on one side, I'll like push on the other side. If you play in the center, I'll push on either side. It's not looking great. Your potential looks very stunted here with how I've played. Not only that, I just have a bunch of points. And you just have pretty much just a detached stick in the middle.
Right, that you're trying to turn into territory, but is being constantly
poked
at from both sides.
Why did I play that move? I mean, I don't hate it, but I guess because I didn't know the Star Knight variation at the time. I know how to kill it now. With the Knight's move, if you try to do a 3/3 invasion on,
oops,
it's a pretty well known.
So you're saying if Black tries to do a 3/3 invasion here.
Yeah, at the time, so I have to have a Star Knight, like the Star and the Knight's move away, and then now I know how to kill it if I already have that move. So Black would have to pass.
Yeah.
And then White comes on top, and this actually I think kills it unconditional. No, it goes to Co in this variation, because there's like a hanging connection. So Black plays right. White attaches. Black usually honeys on either side. I don't think it particularly matters in this case, but yeah, Black does this. And then Black doesn't connect, this is dead. If you connect,
You're dead because
that's
it's just
bad.
not enough space.
Yeah, yeah. So they play the hanging connection. I forget which direction they played it. And I think they played on the 2-2 point.
Okay.
And then you start a co by playing at a4.
And that determines life.
Yeah.
Okay, but you were this you're saying the knight's move from the start point here is what enables you to be able to defend against that, but at the time in the game,
I
you
didn't know that. Yeah, I know the large knights variation, which we can go over. It's pretty quick.
Mhm.
So black invades, same start. White attaches on top. Black moves right. I hane, and then if they go down again, you get to double hane. And this is easier to remember for me,
that makes sense,
just because it's like, oh, I get the double hane here. It's safe.
right? So because of that, it just felt like it was
So it's also co.
right because we sorry on the
Um,
left hand right comes back to the same thing. So you in the bottom left here, when black chooses to just defend, you feel like it's a fine time to get rid of your remaining weaknesses.
Yeah, like, well, where is black going to make points? I already have, look at the top right. I've quashed their potential. They'd have to kill those 4 stones, and I don't think they're going to do that. They don't have any stones on the inside, so.
I think that's another really great point. So when you look at that and you see that and you ask yourself, well, then in that case, what could black do? What is black likely to do? Where could black make points? I mean, invasions is a clear one. So if the structure they're trying to build, you've squashed, they need to get points elsewhere. Looking to invade makes the most sense. And since you have Sente, just you've got the initiative. You can determine the flow. Just playing defensive for a turn and locking things down when you have the strong advantage like you do makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then this is another slow move for the same reason.
Yeah, I think like it. This is. I think
The fight breaks out soon, though.
Yeah, we'll get to. I think we should get to the fight. I was just gonna say that I think there is maybe it's important in this game to separate the idea from the execution, right? So that we've talked about how the idea can work, and that the idea we've seen it work in other games, but the execution here isn't quite lining up for it being too small or being too defensive, being too conciliatory at times. But so I mean, when black plays that purely defensive move again, you do exactly what you did on the other side, which is work from a strong base and get aggressive, reduce. And now I think we get into
The fighting,
the
yeah.
fighting because, like you said, black is if things were to just progress, black is going to lose. Black needs to make something happen. Needs to severely somehow reduce territory. Needs to capture things ideally to start to turn it around.
Yeah. I mean, even if I could probably just blunder the corner, right? I could blunder those 2 stones that are by the T piece, and I think I'm still perfectly fine. Which is the issue. There's nowhere you can fight that I will make the fight big enough for you.
Right.
I can just let you get what you want, and I'll still win because you're just so far behind. But in this case, it's a capturing race. I had to like really check after the move they played that there was no shenanigans.
Right.
That was still this is one of those 2 a.m. games. So I didn't want to get tricked. So I think I hane on top, which wins the capturing race outright. I mean, I'm already winning the capturing race, as you can see. There's a ladder here. You just need to make sure you have 2 liberties as white. And then the hane on top is good shape because it forces them to come back. They fixed this shape, but I just reduce my problems and they come back, and I now have Sente.
And right. And the nice thing here is then they They take in that again. You have
Fix a
center,
problem.
so
Yeah.
and at this point, if we look at where we are at the game, one of the other issues is not only were you able to get and hold on to the bottom right, you've now severely cut into the territory that Spotyus was hoping to make, and done so in a way that is difficult to undermine. It's in this case these incursions here are backed with stones, with strong stones and well placed stones to set up. So it's not like you can just try and do or Spotyus could try and do an easy cutoff. And I think, we have you playing the 3/3 just to remove any possibility. I think what we have is Spotyus trying to figure, or it seems to me we have Spotyus trying to figure out how can I get points from this. And I think that there's maybe just a little bit of a loss. We have another fight here.
And this is an interesting fight right here, just because of what I did. I think this next move is the move that's interesting for me. But no, that's boring. Where is it? Okay, yeah, I think it's the next move. Yeah, right here. This is interesting shape for me. It's not bad shape. It's just like they can't do anything now. So as long as my two stones are connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which they will be. There's a Miai connection. They can't be captured. And other than that, there's a tactical defense. So let's assume that I can't for some reason take the easy connection and Atari. I have to take the slightly bigger one. That breaks up right
Mm-hmm.
there. Let's just say they get a bunch of free moves on the outside somehow. Either way that they try to Atari on the inside, I just take, and there's no snapback here because I have two liberties when I take. Even though it's horrendous looking shape, that's classic B2 bomber. It's perfectly safe and a pretty huge reduction.
Right.
And very strong.
Right. I think it's also good that not only did you correctly read out that you were safe, you also read out that you also knew that you could let your opponent make another 3 extra moves before you needed to at least a couple extra moves before you even needed to respond.
Would have been funnier if I just gave it up, just took the entire bottom.
Which, I mean, that would be another thing that you could also do, right?
You could sacrifice it.
You could sacrifice it to play even bigger because you've got the advantage. You don't need
the points, and it's only it's like 6. It's like it's about 20 point swing in that area, but like you're also taking massive points if you take the bottom. They do not have a base, like they don't have a guaranteed base anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually happens.
So
I'm not 100% sure. I don't think I sacrifice, but I just start carving out the bottom. Like, these are your points, and they're just not going to respond.
Yeah. And we see the way in which Spotyus is trying to reduce by poking here. So there's a lot of an extra move forward here, a move to the side here to try to see what they can get done. But
you're making me stronger in the process.
Right. That's the thing is you set your space up so you could get ahead and influence early on, and now when they come back to poke, they're helping you turn that influence into territory. They're helping you strengthen for small reductions, but not nearly the amount that they're looking for.
Well, they aren't really reductions because that's kind of the area that. Well, I guess they are reductions technically.
But that's fair. You weren't. You had already.
It's not like you're
accounted. Yeah,
this is already like what I wanted. Like you're not invading me. Invading, like, it probably would have been a better idea to rather than do all these pokes to find some sort of invasion on the left. I think that's probably your strongest since you do have 2 running options to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am unable to run out myself, there's probably a few stones that are going to get captured. So because of that, I think it was better to just try and start some sort of random invasion somewhere. Or let's go back a few moves to before they started this hand fighting. So let's say they take the first diagonal and I block, right? On the top right. So move 96.
Move 96. I went
Okay.
a little bit too far back. So
Okay, so because of this, you don't really have too many options. However, I think the submarine invasion still works here. You know what that is?
I don't know the submarine invasion.
Oh, you don't know the submarine invasion?
I don't know
Let's
the
go.
yeah.
It's B15. Yeah, it's no slightly further.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, let's see. Sorry.
Yeah, and the reason this usually works is because it's Mii to run away and make a base, and to make a base at sea. And I think in this case it works because you can run out. So even if you don't make life, you're threatening to make life versus threatening to connect.
Would white not play it?
White would respond there. Yeah, white would
B17?
respond there,
And
and then black extends.
extends it with a D15?
Yes. And then white probably wants to wedge, and then you Atari. And then other way. You want to Atari the other two stones. Why? Because if you try to Atari that stone, that gets captured, and now there's a bunch of Aji in the corner now. In fact, I think... Does it win on the spot? There's definitely something that's going on with the D17, E17. I know
Yeah.
E17 definitely works. E17 guarantees that you come through, I think. But there is a lot of Aji. The reason this works, though, by the way, is if you play E17 out, for those who don't know, white has to extend, and then black extends. And then white really owes a move here eventually. White wants to try and save a stone he can fix, right? Fix on the right, because that's a really bad cut.
That's fair.
But if you do that, black Ataris, the 3 stones. And then black comes up again, and it's just basically a tiny net.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if
white can't do anything.
If white tries to fix, black can just take the cut. So you're in a situation where at that point you're going to lose something.
Yeah. Which is why you probably shouldn't respond with 4. You should probably just let the connection exist. Probably peeping is correct. Peeping is probably the correct move since it gives you an extra move on the outside that they have to take and allows you to have Sente still. That one works. The other peep, I mean, yeah, I guess that one's stronger. I agree with your peep. That one's bad shape, and after they connect, you can fix on the other side too by playing at B13, and there's no more problems.
Every time.
No, that allows the monkey jump, yeah. There you go. No monkey jump.
Confusing my B's and my C's. So I think
there might be some shenanigans here. You do have a wedge that's possible, but I don't think it quite works. Because you have the Atari, and then you can connect.
Right.
But now you have issues on the other side. Now black can push through, and there's like actual issues of getting through.
I think this is a really good. So this is wonderful. One, learning a new technique is fantastic. Thank you. And another thing I think is the difference between the ways in which Spotyus I think was had that desire, but the ways in which they were poking were just continuously strengthening you and didn't allow them to really get anything. And I think being able to show an example of how you might play, how you might start with, or play a little bit further than maybe Spotyus is generally comfortable with, and how you can, with some reading, turn that into a much more potentially advantageous or a lot more complicated variation here to give you that fighting chance that you need is great to see. Because this jump here, this 2-point jump with B15 is much farther than we see in the rest of the game. Spotyus is taking this very closed approach because it makes sense intuitively that if you want to play safe, it's safe. But you're demonstrating how
It's inefficient.
it's
That's the
inefficient,
thing.
and you can when you need to make up points, if you can figure out how to be looser, faster, and still come out ahead, it can do a lot for you.
Yeah, it makes if you can play more efficient than your opponent, you're going to have more points than your opponent. And the game's about having the most points, so it's all about that.
So if we jump back to the way, so
Oh yeah, this is the best move of the game. The next move I make. I don't make it yet. I have to be safe first before I make it. I think. They make a few moves. Yeah, there we go.
you,
I reduced the ice pitch, guys.
you, whew, that's one eye now. That's not instead of four. That's one eye. It's a good thing there's only another.
Let's count. I'll count. 1, 2. Okay, well, let's count in pairs, like good counting people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 eyes. 8, so 16 eyes. 16 eyes.
I think that it might be okay. I mean,
I think it might be alive too.
I appreciate that you saw the opportunity to reduce the eye space, though. It's the principle of the matter.
Yeah, I mean, and the best part is what they do after. No point loss. Let's go.
So this is a good so eye space reduction aside, this is a really good example of how
scoring works in Japanese rules.
Yeah, and just also, you need to respond to everything? But let's go over. You have a bigger point to make, which is scoring. So let's go ahead and talk about that.
We're going to talk about. I'm going to try and briefly go over the 3 main systems. There's the Chinese rules, which I know China obviously uses it, but I'm pretty sure. Does Korea use it, or does Korea use Japanese?
I thought Korea went with Japanese rules. I can double check that though.
Okay, well, you check that. The 2 major ones are Chinese and Japanese. There's also AGA, which is the American Go Association. We'll get to that one in a second. So the main difference between Japanese rules and Chinese rules is that in Chinese rules, your stones count as a point. And in Japanese rules, they don't. So the main difference is that whenever you play a stone in Chinese rules, you're gaining a point. But whenever your stones get captured, you're losing points because those stones are no longer on the board. So there's no need to give your opponent points for that. Whereas in Japanese rules, placing a stone doesn't equal anything. It's just the territory that matters. And not only that, whenever you capture, you get an extra point. However, it's also important to note that if you place around a stone to capture it, you'll lose that point, even if both of you know it's dead. So in this case, it's pretty obvious that the stone I played is dead. So there's no need to play there, because placing anywhere around it would reduce the amount of space there is by 1 point. Whereas if you just go to scoring, you can say that stone's dead, that's 1 point, and then you didn't have to fill in the extra side to call it dead.
Right. So
in Chinese rules, you don't have to worry about that. In Chinese rules, you can... It's funny because non-essential codes, dames, are actually co-threats. Which is pretty funny.
a quick look from a comment thread about 9 years ago is that at that point, Korean tournaments used territory scoring, so they used the Japanese.
And then there's AGA, which AGA has a cool rule. Do you know about the AGA rule?
I knew it at one point, but you should explain it because I have definitely forgotten.
Okay, so the big issue between going from Japanese and Chinese scoring is that they are different whenever the amount of stones being played are different. So if your opponent passes, that's when there's issues with there's a difference between scoring and the 2 modes. Whereas if both people play the same amount, it's perfectly fine. It's all the same. So because of that, AGA has made a rule to where that their territory scoring, except if your opponent passes, you get a point from them. You get a captured stone. And this is to fix situations like bit 4 in the corner, which in Japanese rules is dead, but in order to actually kill it, you have to lose more points than it's worth to actually win the ko. Which is why Japanese rules, they just say this is a dead shape. You don't need to do anything else about it. Because you lose a ton of points trying to fix it, but the group itself is conceptually dead by their standards. It's also important to note that AJA also has Super Co rules, which is the board position cannot repeat. That's it. There's funny situations. In fact, Chochikun is very famous for this, for making triple co's, and then the game's void because nobody can play on. Classic Cho.
So we actually, I didn't realize for a second as I was listening that we had jumped ahead a little bit. The other thing I want to mention is just when you're in a position like Spotyus is, and you're trying to figure out is this a threat, right? So, I mean, you played on a key point here within this individual shape, but does that matter? One of the ways we ask, does that matter, is what can they do with it, right? So then we try to read out where else are they going to play, and from that is where we see that it doesn't mean anything. The stone is essentially dead. But when you're not certain, starting there to figure out what can happen is important, because there's like the instinctual level fear of now you're playing inside. What are you trying to accomplish? But if you're not reading anything and you've taken the time to double check, you are ceding points in this case. Or one other thing just to mention is that, as opposed to playing on 09, if you really felt like there was something that was a problem, you likely would have been able to play on P8, so you wouldn't be
points.
You wouldn't be losing points in that territory. You would still be shoring up a weakness if you felt like it was there.
Yeah.
But
I'd also like to. You continue your rant. I realized we skipped something that's mildly important to me, at least,
sure.
with how I played.
Yeah.
So I enclosed the top right, and I think we just glossed over this. I don't even think we mentioned it. The top right I enclosed, but I actually don't think this is the best way to enclose this. I think this is actually inefficient because you'll see soon. In fact, I think we can go ahead, and we'll see why I think this is inefficient with foresight. The idea is good, wrong place. They should have played where I played. They would have had more space. And the reason I'm saying that this is a mistake from me is that if they played, so let's go back to their move. Let's say they played on my spot.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bunch of slides and extensions they can do, and they're guaranteed pretty much a slide and potentially some more shape. I do have weaknesses here. What I should have played, there's two options. I could have done the thing that you like to do for some reason, which is the simple descent. You really love that enclosure.
I do really love that enclosure.
I think it's a beautiful move, but also it looks so stupid when you're doing it in the middle of something.
That's fair.
It's I'm just gonna strengthen my stone.
Yep.
I actually like the jump a little better here instead of the descent at Q18. Because I can sacrifice my bottom points. So at the time I played this, there's still not we still weren't guaranteed who actually got the right side. It was unclear. But this guarantees that the other side's safe. Whereas the move I played just leaves a little too much space on the left, so it's invadable. So I think that's actually a mistake by me that I made.
So you were talking about back when you ended up playing at R17. You're saying that we can see with foresight later on towards the end of the game. Now you would look and say that the one space jump with Q18 feels stronger because it feels better balanced.
Yeah, well, it's the monkey jump. You immediately there's no ice space anymore for if you try to invade at the same spot, because I just monkey jump you, and like, what are you gonna do? Just monkey jump under it, and then you just chase the stone around, and it's dead.
It's finished.
You'd have to try and create a bunch of weaknesses by attaching to a bunch of things. So attaching under might work. You have to do a bunch of random attaches and probably sacrifice something to make that live. But it is worth trying to make that live. Because I'm trading, like, I could probably just let you live, to be honest. I get the right side if
nothing else. Yeah, and you still...
Yeah, like, let's say they slide.
Sure.
Yeah, just...
So have them slide...
Let's say...
No.
It doesn't matter. And then I do a large knight's move attachment to the right, and then whoop-de-doo, I'm now connected. Right side. The right side's bigger. So at R9, R10, R10. I'm connected.
Yeah,
There's like nothing they can do. At least they're okay. So technically we cheated how to play an extra stone there, and it just happened to be useful.
We did.
But
no,
it's still connected. It's complicated, but even without the 3 stone, the 2 stones on the right are actually strong enough to be connected.
So the other thing too, just as a last point, is if we can look real quick at the N17 stone. If we look at the N17 stone, we look at the board state now versus if we go back to where it was in the actual game. When we're looking to when you try to invade it move 127, granted N15 instead of N17, you have so much less space to work with. So Spotyus, I like Spotyus's... I'm glad that Spotyus is trying to invade and make something happen, but it happens so late in the game that there are far fewer options, and it is much more difficult to make anything happen, which is where if we...
The pokes would have been,
way stronger earlier, but as you pointed out, there's still some options here that they could explore, that it isn't entirely locked down.
I think the pokes were necessary here. In fact, it makes me stronger. In fact, the only reason I can play N17 here is because of the wall. But I guess you wouldn't be close enough to really play, but you'd be threatening it, right? So it'd be a much more complicated situation if if Spotyus didn't take these pokes,
right,
and then played there, because you aren't going to live, but you can try and run out, or can try and capture something to get out.
Right.
Because I am weak, as you can see. The bottom bits are not that strong. There's a bunch of hanging loose connections that can be poked out, for shape at least.
Right.
And they try. They try. I give them credit. They definitely tried. But the issue is, Panukis are fall size.
And there's just not enough space to work with.
Yeah.
The fall size here. And so again, we have, the same approach, the same concept of let's get in and try to do some damage. But we can see by this point in the game, it is like, if we go back and look, just at this point in the game, we're looking at
if they wanted to do an invasion here, they should have done the 3-3 invasion way earlier, in my opinion. Like, that would have been way better of an option. Noted, I'd probably kill it. I'd probably kill them. They'd probably make a mistake. It's pretty easy to make a mistake in the corner if you're not used to it. But just because of how they play, they don't realize that's an invasion that can be done. Mm-hmm. And that's just such a powerful invasion to just know exists.
That you can take advantage of. Yeah, and I think they don't take advantage of it. They don't try it. We get to this stage in the game where we're towards the end, and now they're ready to invade with E7, but at that point they are surrounded. So we see you very calmly crunch down anytime they try to get anywhere, and there just is not enough space. Your groups are too strong, and they aren't able to really exploit any weaknesses, and we get I think for the most part a reduction here, another invasion. I know that this was really nice.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. This is a cool Tetsuji.
So
So, wait. So you ask first. You ask first, and
Well,
then
just
I'll respond.
you know, how
Um,
how far out did you read this? At what point were you had you read that you could lock this down?
Immediately. I think. Well, go back to. Okay, I played here. Yeah, I knew with that move, this group is actually dead. Um, the group's too weak. I'm too strong around it, so I can do things like just skirt right here.
Right.
And then if you don't know, skirts can go into monkey jumps. And right here, I know this is dead because of the shape. Um, in fact, if they, I think they played the wrong move. They should have tried to go for an extension, right? I think it's very unlikely this lives after this point. So let's say um, the strongest variation is black extends down at B15,
Yeah.
I Hane, and then they block on top. You want to block at C18 because there's more chance it's Seki there.
Okay.
And then it doesn't look like black has enough space because white can come in. So white can first poke at 15A, and the shape is still dead. Because black, what is black going to do? You know, there's no target works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So if black tries, there's still. I
This,
mean,
the shape we're talking about, complete the shape. This is a comment, or you don't even need to fill in. It's just dead because
That's
it's a
right.
bulky 5, right? That A18
Yeah,
point,
right.
the hanging point right there is very important because that's the point you need to play. Generally, whenever you see these odd number groups with like an extra hanging bit on the outside, the important part is the joint bit. For example, the Rabbity 6, do you know what that is? I don't think we can easily make it on this board state, but it's like this shape, but it's doubled. You have a L shape on the outside, and you play in the center of that.
Yeah.
You in the 3 shape and the potential unsettled 3 the 3 space shape, you play in the center, the joint, or if it's like a straight line, you play in the center of that, and that works too. Yeah, but yeah, I knew from after the jump that this was dead, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm like, oh, I read this out. This is dead.
So we can see the way in which.
Yeah,
And
this is a cleaner way to kill, in my opinion, because yeah, I think it takes less points. No,
It's not.
no, it prevents it from being co. So okay, so if you take it, so for example, if you take the stone,
Oh, there we go.
so go back.
You mean as
If white goes back, no, not yet. It's too late. If white takes the co,
Yeah.
then black plays right there, and because of I don't play. Do I play there? Yes, I do play there. My bad. I didn't think about that. I just know that it's cleaner to. There's less Aji if you go do the other way because I think this leaves a co-threat technically.
Right. If you didn't, like if you went and played elsewhere, the other issue here is then you have to fight.
Well, yeah. The thing is that's worse for long term, but I mean in this game it doesn't matter. There's no co. We didn't really need to fight a co. But in other games where you need to fight a co, that is pretty important because that's life or death in the corner for free basically. And I think it's like actually pretty big because that's like several co-threats, you know.
And so we have this. I'm a bit surprised. Not it wouldn't have been. It wouldn't. Well, I guess it really. No, that's fine. That's fine. I was gonna say I was a little bit surprised that Spotyus didn't try to take B14, but I think Spotyus correctly recognized that the group itself was dead. That the group it was coming off of was dead, and so rather than that, they were instead, saw that this wasn't going to, didn't look like it was going to do anything. There isn't, you'd be looking to try and make something happen here, but that doesn't look like there's enough to work with. So instead, they're looking elsewhere. I think the big thing here is we look at how this pans out. Is there's in the other places that they're trying at a point in which they are just too isolated and too small, and you can fill in the space and just.
That's a cool. Yeah, that was unnecessary by me, but
You wanted to do
because
the throw in.
yeah, I wanted to do the throw in. Was it called kills the group? A7 kills the group.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the spot, even with even if you give them an eye, because it's only one eye. So we back up 2 moves instead of doing the throw in, which technically loses me a point. Yeah, just A7. Like I don't even need to play Incente because it's Gote to die here.
So again, there isn't. I mean, you're right. The throne was necessary, but you because it was still going to die either way, and we see that.
Yeah, I was just playing with my food right here.
We see that multiple times where I think that Spotyus had a very cool idea in the beginning. I think played too well. Wait. We'll get into the wrap up in like 2 seconds here. So here's how the game ends. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Tell me your thoughts.
Try to avoid playing in the center if you're new. It's a common trap. Everybody does it. It looks so big, but it really is not gonna work out for you. Unless it's a handicap stone. If it's a handicap stone, go and place that bad boy down in the center and play corners. But you really struggle to make points easily if you play Tengen. You're often, especially if you play white Tengen, you just have a hard time actually getting any base settled. So because of that, your opponent will just kind of poke you from other sides while also threatening to make points and just being super efficient. Whereas if you play the center, you're going to have to block on all sides, and you're going to have a harder time getting enough points. It's really hard to utilize the center properly, and generally the best way to use the center is to only have 1 or 2 stones there, and then try and make a bunch of ladder fights where it's useful. That tends to be the best way to use a center stone, from my experience. Just prevent ladders from working, while also increasing your development. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the only things I wanted to add is just, I think also in addition to the ways in which Spotyus had the idea to use the center, but it didn't really pan out. The move efficiency really felt super key as well in this, and we could see by move 23 that the move efficiency and the use of space had such a profound effect on the way the board was set up. Once the board began to progress and more moves were put down, we could see the ways in which your better space efficiency and your better move efficiency set you up on a path to be able to play very comfortably, which doesn't mean that there weren't things that were possible for Spotyus. I appreciate some of the examples you gave us there, but that the only other thing being that if you find yourself in that position, continuing to play small, we can see why continuing to play very close to the chest, small move after small move ends up hurting you because it can't get you. It can't let you catch up when you are behind, and that instead looking for other options, looking for bigger options, more aggressive options, trying to do what Spotyus did at the end game, trying to do that earlier when less of the board is settled, when there are more places to go, when there are more options available to you, could help you pull back. So I really like that Spotyus did eventually look to invade. I think taking that mindset, if they find themselves behind like that, taking that mindset and looking at that much sooner might have made the game closer and helped to give them a little bit more breathing room and not make them feel like they were trying to constantly catch their breath. Conversely, I really like the way in which you set yourself up early game, Ruler. You had that, I've mentioned it many, many times, that good space efficiency. And once you had it, you were looking to pressure your opponent because you could do very strong reductions. And then after you'd done some of those reductions, you still had your eye on your own weaknesses. You still had your thought process of how could I lose this? What would my opponent need to do? What would they want to do? And you would play defensive. You weren't reckless. And because of that, you were able to set up this great solid foundation so that by the time Spotyus was coming at your door, you had no trouble. You were
Yeah.
very ready for all of it, and were able to be even more move efficient to get further reductions in.
I was hoping they would just play on the inside sometimes, just because there's some spots they can just live. If they play at like D7, I'm pretty sure there's like points of it where it's just too much space. I really should. There's some spots I should have defended. I feel like you're giving a little bit too much credit for being.
That's fair. Right. It's not that you were completely impregnable, but in the way that the game played out, it certainly at moments
Felt like it. Yeah.
But it's a good point. From Spotyus's position, there were absolutely a number of points that they still could utilize. Trying to see those earlier, I think would do a lot there. But it was also very cool.
Yeah.
Last thing, I think that the method of the mindset and the execution were kind of at odds for Spotyus. It didn't pan out the way that they had envisioned. It was still cool to see them try a really different approach, and I hope that if they want to try this style in the future, they're able to sort of look at some of the games that we've had in these earlier rounds to see how you can make that work. Because if you are going to do it, there's definitely it works.
Yeah.
It works better.
It's hard to play all diagonal and win. I'm not gonna lie. They won Connect 4 though.
They did.
I'll give them that.
They
beat me in is it Gomuko? It's like Connect 5 basically.
Oh. They beat you there too.
It uses the same thing as a Go board. It uses a Go bond.
I do hope. Maybe the other thing is I do hope that Spotyus and others who look at this don't come away feeling like that the center is impossible, or that playing a center-based play could never work, or that that.
I mean, I play the center, right? I play a center pretty oriented gameplay.
Exactly, and that is your focus, and you're making it work. And when you're not, you've analyzed and are trying to analyze how you can shore up those weaknesses. But it's absolutely possible. It can work. But there are tricks of the trade. There are practices to make it happen that I think Spotyus and others are interested in. Would probably be good to study or get a little bit of advice on to give them an easier time so that they don't have to fight for their life throughout the entire thing. But I think I've said I've more than taken up my share of the time. But it was, I really appreciate seeing this game. If you're a fan of chess, Wargroove, turn-based games in general, definitely check out the Groove of War channel. They're obviously doing Wargroove replays, but also chess replays from the tournament. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and Ruler, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. See you, nerds.